Populations of the world are caught in a somnambulant trance, neither awake nor fully asleep. This trance is a possession. The Cree had a name for it: Wetiko. Wetiko is a psycho-spiritual disease defined as a malignant narcissism that is contagious, so much so that it is silently spreading throughout the entire globe. From the 80s to the 2000s, narcissistic scores skyrocket. Preceding this is a notable rise in depression. And it just so happens that anxiety rose from being a relatively rare condition in the 1950s to being so common that 80% of teenagers in the late 90s were experiencing clinical level anxiety worse than people being treated for the same ailment in insane asylums in the 50s. So what can account for this incredible rise in depression, anxiety, and now narcissism? It is by no accident. It is in fact the architecture of cultural engineers who are themselves infected with the Wetiko mind virus of malignant narcissism. Take this example for instance. The CIA declassified document outlines how MKUltra, the mind control experiments from the 50s and 60s, could be implemented. This example explicitly describes the use of a drug to induce an agitating effect, producing anxiety, nervousness, tension, etc., or a depressing effect, creating a feeling of despondency, hopelessness, lethargy, etc. And this is consistent with the entire MKUltra programming. Instilling enough trauma makes a subject obedient to outer authority and the ideology of the Wetiko program itself, thus replicating Wetikos en masse.
From 1950 until the mid-60s, Montreal's respected psychiatric facility, the Allen Memorial Institute, was the site of secret brainwashing experiments, funded by the CIA under the codename MKUltra.
MKUltra was so top secret that the public had no real knowing of what it was about until the late 1980s. After 9 MKUltra victims successfully sued the CIA for a lump sum of $750,000, this was the CIA's biggest lawsuit in their history up until that point. It was through this exposure that other victims of MKUltra torture research were able to come forward. Gail Kastner, a straight-A nursing student at McGill University, was suffering from a mild case of depression and anxiety. So she went to visit the local campus's psychiatrist, Ewan Cameron. Little did Gail Kastner know that she was stepping into Ewan Cameron's mind control research, sponsored by the CIA. At no point did Dr. Ewan Cameron establish any consent whatsoever to carry out the horrific experiments that would follow.
With some patients, Dr. Cameron tried a drastic treatment called depatterning. Massive doses of electroshock, 20 times more intense than the standard shock treatments used today, were administered to patients who were kept sleeping for days.
Gail would receive incredible amounts of shock therapy, chemically induced comas, some comas lasting for entire weeks. She was injected with PCP and LSD, and then she was exposed to something called psychic driving. This is where a tape will play the same word over and over and over again, all with the intention of reprogramming human behavior. In Cameron's words, his goal was to create a tabula rasa, a blank slate, a new human that could be remolded from scratch. Gail Kastner would spend the rest of her life disabled under the care of her family. It was only because her family was able to recognize the symptoms that she had experienced for 3 decades, as described in this international lawsuit, were they able to put the pieces together and realize their loved one was also a victim.
It put me on sleep treatment, and they kept you asleep for 23 days. And while I was asleep, they were shocking the heck out of me with electric shocks and playing tapes.
The total number of non-consenting victims of Cameron's MKUltra experimentation is not publicly known. Cameron was, after all, merely one of a horde of Hippocratically bankrupt doctors torturing people, as MKUltra was a massive project encompassing thousands of participants throughout its exposed crimes, let alone its unexposed crimes. The McGill student Gail Kastner's haunting example highlights the very fact that this entire program was nearly erased from history, just as its victims had their minds erased.
How did those patients regard, or apparently regard, Dr. Cameron?
Those patients were too far gone.
Amnesia was one of the accomplishments of Cameron's work. But they did not count on the victims' loving families who sought justice.
Are you ready? Here we go.
Now, if you're like me, you're probably asking the question, who would have ever thought that shock torture was therapeutic or useful for cultural engineering? In the 1950s, shock therapy, as it was called, was cutting edge for psychiatry. Invented by Hugo Serletti. Dr. Hugo, or Hughie for short, visited a Roman slaughterhouse. As the doctor and his assistant watched pigs being slaughtered, he screamed, "Eureka! A cure for mental illness! A cure for what? A cure for mental illness! The electrodes, you fool! They shocked the pigs before they got them! It will cure it!" Dr. Hugo and his assistant then carried out the experiment with real human beings. And I know what you're thinking. He had his medical license revoked and he was imprisoned immediately. But he was not imprisoned, and his medical license was not revoked. Hugo was applauded by the entire psychiatric community. Great work, Hugo, shocking the shit out of insane asylum patients, making them well by frying their brains, instead of the conventional method of scrambling the brain with the old ice pick method. What an upgrade the shock therapy became. Out of the way, Monez. We have a new method for readjusting the minds of the unwell. Yeah, the bar wasn't very high for psychiatric medicine in the 1950s, or the 2000s. And this is a large reason why MKUltra would go on to use shock as a pivotal part of its program. This shocking principle, whether it was done with electricity, or even chemically, or linguistically, or sensorially, it always was working toward the same goal, which was to override the human nervous system to the point that it is so incapable of discerning the outer world that it requires authority to tell it what to believe and how to act. And these developments were no small thing contained in some weird bubble of experimentation in the 50s and 60s. These tools were used for cultural warfare in the United States, South America, Indonesia, and other parts of the world. The CIA even created a manual called the Kubark Manual based on the principles of shock torture. And some unseen group of megalomaniacs decided, based upon this exclusive research, to use the principles of shocking entire populations, not just individuals. This started in Indonesia during the CIA-backed genocide of 1 to 2 million people. It happened in Chile, where a democratic elected government was overthrown by, again, the CIA. Other South American countries such as Argentina, Brazil, and Peru would also be eventually overthrown by these CIA-backed programs. And all of these countries would be exposed to cultural warfare built on these principles of shock. And these principles would also go into economic shock. Wait a minute, that sounds very familiar. Economic shock. According to MKUltra survivor and human trafficking victim Kathy O'Brien,
I heard Ronald Reagan telling Brian Mulroney that he believed the only way to world peace was through mind control of the masses. I I know from experience there's no peace of mind under mind control. And I wonder at a world peace where people don't have peace of mind.
She alleges that the intention was to use MKUltra on a global level.
A new world order. A world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations.
The people that were involved were following directions from George Bush. I don't purport to know it all. I don't purport to know that George Bush is at the very top of all this, but he is as high up as I knew. It was my experience that Ronald Reagan answered to George Bush, not robotically, not under mind control, but willingly, because George Bush was respected for what he knew about bringing in the New World Order. Consider his past. George Bush first began with the United Nations. Then he went on to head our CIA. Then he ran our country through 3 administrations that I'm aware of, the Reagan administration, his administration, and the Clinton administration.
And it would make sense that George Bush Sr. would be delegating such a program, as he was once the director of the CIA that developed these very techniques. The public still is in the dark on how exactly this technology had been advanced since the 50s and 60s. Undoubtedly, advanced technology based on this was made.
It was 1980 and my daughter Kelly was born. She was born directly into the MKUltra Mind Control Project on a much higher level, a more sophisticated technological level than I was subjected to. In addition to trauma, she was subjected to harmonic mind control programming on NASA installations literally since birth.
A simple patent research into a few of these technologies will reveal alarming uses of these techniques. So to recap, because it arranged psychiatrists' visit to a slaughterhouse in the 1930s, we now have countless technologies and systems in place to keep the population in a perpetual state of agitation, all for the purpose of control. Just examine the evidence yourselves. They intentionally induce anxiety and depression. These 2 forces are known to lead to narcissism, because it is a Wetiko generating machine. And this again has to do with how the whole system has been conceived. You see, it is a system built by Wetikos, malignant narcissists, and they have created an entire cultural machine geared toward creating more Wetikos, more malignant narcissists. And this is a really good time to point out the difference between a positive, healthy ego and a narcissistic, unhealthy ego. A healthy ego translates to a healthy self-esteem, meaning you can love what you do. You're open to ideas without being defensive. Conversely, the unhealthy ego, the narcissist, projects superiority to hide their fragility. And a full-blown Wetiko, taken far enough, manipulates like they breathe air, all to fill an unfillable void, consuming and consuming, consuming without end. Does this sound familiar? You see, the emptiness of the full-blown Wetikos, as they are called in Paul Levy's book, Wetiko, is a bottomless chasm. And this is why they're trying to always fill it. This is why the extremes are witnessed in the 2026 emails that have been released. This is the monstrosity of this spiritual disease. It defies everything we hold sacred.
Now, if you read that parable in the book of Luke, you will discover that this man utters about 60 words. And do you know, in 60 words, he said I and my more than 15 times. This man was a fool because he said I and my so much until he lost the capacity to say we and our. This man talked like he could build the barns by himself, like he could till the soil by himself. He failed to realize that wealth is always a result of the commonwealth. No, my friends, I don't want you to forget it. No matter where you are today, somebody helped you to get there.
See you in the next one when I take on the worst Wetikos and we learn a little bit about maybe some ESP or something cool. Followed up with Alan Turing's Revenge, a series where Alan Turing reincarnates through the computer grid system that he invented himself in the 50s and 40s, and he gets his vengeance against those royals, those lizards. He tortures them up real good. Oh yeah.